Hey everybody, welcome back to the Build Show Network. Steve Basic Architect. I'm out at one of my favorite places. We return to the Hilltop Aero here. And today we're going to talk about windows. Now, we've talked about these windows before. We've talked about tilt-turn operation. Just as a reminder, if I turn the handle 90 degrees, I get to swing the window out in. I get to clean it from inside. If I take the window in, and I continue the rotation another 90 degrees, the whole window tilts in. That's how we vent the space, right? So in Europe, that's an open window. But we're not here to talk about window operation today. What we're going to talk about is, although all of these windows are the same, they're not really the same. And we're going to talk about those differences, what makes up those differences, and why it matters when we're selecting different windows. Right? So we'll start with the window that I just talked about here, this tilt turn. All these windows have a label. So the label tells us a number of things, right? We have COG U factor, which is center of glass, 0.107. So what that is telling me is that somewhere in the center of the glass, we're basically at R10, if you understand our values. And the way you get to that is you take 1 and you divide it by the 0.107, and that gets you to that R10. So it's basically the reciprocal of the U value there. The U factor of the window in its whole with the frame and the glass is at 0.158. You can see that that's significantly less, right? So if I take the reciprocal of that, 0.158 gets me to probably about R6.3, right? So it's significantly lower than here. So what generates that delta? Well, the center of glass is basically just measuring the R value of the center of the glass of the IGU, which is insulating glazing unit. The other number at 0.158, well, that's taking into account the frames, and in this case, we have the sash, or basically the frame of the operable piece, but then we also have the frame here that makes up the window frame that receives the sash. So we have a lot of aluminum going there, and even though it's thermally broken aluminum, it's not as good an insulator as the center of the glass. So we take that center of the glass, we mix it with the frame, which is much poorer, and then we basically get the window U factor. And that's at 0.15 again, R6.3 in that number frame. Now, this is a window, we're 4 feet wide, 6 foot tall, and it generates those numbers. Now, we're gonna go over to this window, and this window here is 10 foot wide, 6 foot tall. So it's basically 2.5 times the size of that window. Now, you would think, wow, this big old window has to be super energy inefficient. Well, it's quite the contrary. Remember, as we just pointed out over there, the center of the glass is at R10. The frame on that was 6.3, but that was an operable frame. So we had twice the amount of basic material there making up the frame. This is a fixed unit, so you can see we have considerably less frame here. We have no air leakage in the system, and that generates a U factor for this window at 0.129. Now that translates to roughly 7.6. So we're a whole, R1.5 above that window, even though we're 2.5 sizes bigger than that window, just because we moved from an operable window to a fixed window, right? If we go to yet a third example, and this is another tilt turn. Now, the difference between this tilt turn and the first one we talked about is, this one was 4 foot wide, 6 foot tall, which generated about 4 square feet of window, right? This one here is 3 foot wide by, I think it's about 4.5 foot tall. So this is about 14 square feet of window, maybe just a little bit more than half of that window. But the majority of that half that this one is shrunk is glass. And if you remember from the first example, glass had the higher R value than the frame. So that first window, we would say the glass ratio to frame is much higher than the glass ratio to frame here. And so because this is less, we're at 0.167 here, even though we're still carrying the 0.107 for center of glass. And what that does is it takes that number down to about R6, right? So it's, you know, it's only 0.3, 0.4 less than this. So it's not a huge detriment to the decisions. And obviously this one had to be a different size because it's fitting over cabinets. The countertop's going into the window there, so we don't have any trim. So there's a bunch of design decisions that go beyond just performance. But I think it's really important that when you're designing a building that you understand, well, what drives optimal performance versus where do I end up losing performance, right? Because I'm guessing if I took that window and I said, well, let's make it one that's half that size, 2 foot wide by say 2.5 feet tall, that 0.167 would probably go to like 0.18319, and it would drop that number closer to the R5, right? So still not a bad window. To put it in perspective, I mean, a lot of domestic windows, the code requires about 0.3 for the U value, which basically translates into R3. So, you know, we're twice code here, we're twice code there, and we're 2+ code on the big 10-foot window. So the other parting notion is understand that regardless of how big, how small the windows are, they're never as good as an insulated wall. So the windows are always the worst part of the wall. We're going to jump back. We're going to go back to the studio. We'll pull up some drawings. We'll talk a little bit more about the makeup of a wall and whole wall R value versus window U value, R value, but we'll dive into it a little deeper. So we'll jump back to the studio. Hey everybody. So hopefully you enjoyed that trip out there to Hilltop Aero. I'm thinking this is probably one of the last videos of that project, and we'll be moving on to other pastures. So anyways, you know, it's one of those things, there's tons of information out there in building, and certainly windows can be a career for any one person. It's I've been doing this for 30 years and I still learn stuff every time I have a conversation with the window people or framers, carpenters, contractors, all that stuff. So much information to learn. So don't feel like you can't keep up. There's, you know, I tell everybody when you open a door, all you realize is how much you didn't know. You didn't gain much more knowledge. You gained a whole lot of knowledge of what you don't know, so you have to go figure it out. Anyways, guess who we got? Big Red. It's not quite a matching Big Red color, but got the Big Red shirt on anyway. So let's have at it. We got some window elevations. We're going to dive into these numbers a little quick, even add a little bit of cost data, so you can have some good ammo here next time you go window shopping. So let's have at it. All right, everybody. So printed out here, these are the window elevations. They're drawn out and they get broken out of the set of drawings and out of the building elevations because this is the information that the window supplier uses to quote the window package. So we talked about 3 different windows there. The very first one we talked about was window 1-15. And you notice each one of these windows has an individual tag. We talked about 115, we talked about 1-1, and we talked about 1-2. And you see 3, 4, 5, 6. The second floor, they start out at 1. So we had 15 windows on the first floor, 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, etc., up through 2-7. So we had 7 windows on the second floor. A couple tidbits of information that we put on here is we have the window tag, and we'll use window 1-9 here as the example. So 1-9, and you can see that is a 8-foot window. So we give the unit dimension there, 8 foot, and this is 5 foot there. So 40 square foot window. We also label it as fixed. so that they know they're quoting a fixed window. So we have window 19. We know that it's 8 foot by 5 foot, and it's fixed window. And then we have obviously other information that is universal to the whole package, that they're Aluprof, they're aluminum, the color is anthracite gray, etc., etc. But to the windows specifically, that's that information. You can see some of these windows are labeled as tempered, and they have to be tempered for different reasons, like it's a lift and slide door, or it was in a shower, or in a stairway, or some other hazardous location, bathroom, or it's too close to the floor. There's a number of reasons why windows get tempered. And that does add a little bit to the cost of the window. You can see on some of these also, they have some funky arrows or lines, dashed lines moving through it there and here. What that is those are a tilt turn window labeled TT. And what it's saying is these are the direction of operation. So we have the one that goes down. And the way I always was taught to remember and still remember it is the arrows point to hinge. That is the American standard. So when this points down, that is the tilt version. It means the hinge is here, and this is the strike end of the window, so the window falls in like a hopper. When it has the arrows going side to side, that is the turn option, with the hinge being here and the strike being on that side. These windows are always viewed from the exterior. So that window is swinging inward, and it's hinged on the left side, looking at it from the exterior. So let's dive into the three windows we talked about specifically and reiterate those. So 115, that's a 4 foot by 6 foot window there. And that one had a COG of 0.07, and it had a U value of 0.158. Now, interestingly enough, when we go over to this window, that is 10 foot by 6, and that's 2.5 times window 1-15, right? It still has the 0.107 center of glass, because the glass technology is the same. So the U value here, 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 it's always going to be the same because the glass is made the same way. So that doesn't change. But what does change is, right, at 4 foot by 6 foot, that's 12 and 8. So that's 20 linear feet of frame. This is 6 linear feet of frame. But that 32 is not 2.5 times or 50 linear feet that window is. So the efficiency is born of, they both have the same center of glass, but because this does increase in size, but not proportionally to the size of the window, meaning that we do have more frame, but it's not 2.5 times the frame, this window here yields 0.129. And proportionally, the last window we looked at was this one, 1.1, and 1.1, again, 0.107, but it had a U value of 0.167. Now, I'm speaking in U values. If you want to know, translate that to R value, you simply divide 1 by the U value number. So the 0.158, this is R 6.3. The larger window here is R 7.6, and the last window here is right around R6. So you can see that the larger window here, even though it's more glass, it's more efficient because the center of glass number remains constant, but the frames change the overall U value of the window, meaning that the larger I make the window, the less frame I have, the more or less efficient it becomes. If I took, say, one of these smaller windows that are 2 foot and made it 2 foot wide by 2 foot tall, that would probably, even be closer to like 0.185-ish, right? Which would yield like, R5.5, something in that range. Because we have a lot of frame with an itty bitty piece of glass. So, those little windows, they look nice, they have their place, but when you're dealing with European windows, you really want to be operating in this kind of arena for efficiency and for cost. I'm not going to reveal the exact cost of these windows, but certainly the difference between, say, a fixed and a tilt turn is the tilt turn has a sash and a frame. The sash has to move, so there's associated hardware. There's hardware with it tilting. There's hardware with it turning, all of that. So your typical tilt turn window from European windows, you're probably in a $65 to $75 range, and that's a square foot for the window, right? So, I don't know, you do 4 times 6, 24. 24 times, 65-ish. That's going to put you in, maybe like a $1,400 range or something like that. Now, fixed windows, those are somewhere down in a $35 to $60 range, the square foot. And the reason that's wider is sometimes when you get bigger, they have to move into tempered style windows, and there's some other governing factors that drive that. But, typically the fixed windows are less expensive than the tilt turn windows, just because the tilt turn, you have all that added hardware. There's no hardware in this window. It's a big piece of glass in a big frame that gets inserted in a big hole in the wall, and then it's forgotten about. So you get those numbers. So this is hopefully a little bit of help to demystify some of the thoughts about window performance and how it relates to cost, size, operation, what a window schedule looks like, all that good stuff. So anyways, that's all I got on window performance. All right. Big Red goes to bed. And guess what? It's the last day of the year. So that's the last time you see Big Red in 2021. Next time you see him, he's breaking down doors in 2022. And I can tell you right now, from the outlook of things, Big Red is going to have a very busy year ahead. So anyways, we got a lot of great projects coming up. Find out more. You can always follow me on Instagram, Steve Baczek Architect. You can follow my daughter who works with me, Alexandra Baczek, on Instagram. You can find me talking it up with my good buddies Jake and Peter on the Unbuild It podcast. And you can find it as the Unbuild It show on YouTube. You can actually see our antics behind the scenes there. And then last but not least, we have literally hundreds of videos on the Build Show Network. All kinds of information. Great talent throwing it up. You got Matt, you got Jake, you got Brent, you got Wade, myself. We have Zach, we have Drywall Shorty, Mechanical Hub, Design Build Doug. Just a lot of great information going up there every week for you to go check out. Probably going to be hard to even keep up with it all. But anyways, watch them 7 times. That's what the science says. Thank you again. Wonderful year. We did a lot of fun stuff this year. Big Red came out. We got a lot done, a lot accomplished, and looking forward to a better year next year. So anyways, let's close it out with Happy New Year and long live our buildings.